Maybelle Kane stood on an auction crate, with dust on her hem, and her little sisters clinging to her skirt, while their brother named a price for all three. The courthouse yard had gone quiet, except for wagon wheels and the ugly scratch of Mr. Brackett's pencil, as he prepared to buy their labor, their future, and Maybelle's last shred of pride. Men stared as if poverty had made the Kane girls less than human. Women turned away. Then Cole Holbrook pushed through the crowd, his jaw tight with anger and his hat in his fist, looking not at Maybelle's shame, but at the way she held Ruth and Elsie like a home no auctioneer could sell. Before this frontier story unfolds, comment the country you are watching from. If you believe one kind cowboy can change a forgotten woman's life, subscribe so you do not miss the next romance. By noon, every decent shade in Clearwater County had been taken, but nobody offered any of it to the Kane girls. Maybelle felt the heat through the soles of her worn boots as she stood on the courthouse crate, one hand holding 14-year-old Ruth's wrist, the other resting on 8-year-old Elsie's shoulder. The little one had stopped crying an hour earlier, which frightened Maybelle worse than tears. Elsie only stared at the dusty street, her thin mouth pressed shut, her blue ribbon hanging crooked at the end of one braid. Their brother, Tobias Kane, stood beside the auctioneer with his hat cocked too fine for a man who had not buried his mother properly. He had sold their father's mule the week after the fever took both parents. He had sold the cook stove, the feather beds, the tools, the quilts stitched by their grandmother, and finally the little farm itself. Now there was nothing left but 3 sisters and a paper saying the Kane estate owed money to more people than Maybelle had ever met. Tobias claimed this was mercy. Indenture is better than starvation, he had told Maybelle that morning, not meeting her eyes. Brackett needs girls at the store. You'll sweep, sew sacks, mine accounts if you prove clever enough. Ruth can scrub floors. Elsie can run parcels. Elsie is a child, Maybelle had whispered. She eats like one too. Those words still rang inside her chest as the auctioneer cleared his throat. Ladies and gentlemen, by order of county probate, guardianship and labor contract for the 3 surviving Kane sisters, formerly of North Fork Road. Elder sister, Maybelle Kane, age 20, sound of body, known to read and cipher. Younger sister Ruth Kane, aged 14, sound. Youngest sister, Elsie Kane, aged 8, slight, but able enough for light duties. Able enough. Maybelle's fingers tightened until Ruth flinched. She loosened her grip at once, ashamed even of that small hurt. The crowd shifted. Some came because they were cruel. Some came because they were curious. Some came because in a small county, shame was a bell that called everyone to worship. Mrs. Talbot, who sang hymns on Sundays, whispered behind her glove. The blacksmith's wife shook her head as if sorrow excused her from helping. Boys perched on the hitching rail, grinning until Maybelle looked at them. Then they looked away, for there was something in her face that would not let them fully enjoy the spectacle. At the foot of the crate, Franklin Brackett stood in a gray town coat despite the heat. He owned the general store, the freight shed, half the debts in Clearwater, and the kind of smile that treated hardship like a bargain bin. He tapped his pencil against a small ledger. "I'll start at $40 for the lot," Brackett said. "The lot." Ruth gave a sharp breath. Elsie leaned into Maybelle's leg. The auctioneer glanced around. $40 bid. Maybelle looked toward Tobias. "Don't do this." Her brother's face hardened, but his mouth twitched. She knew that twitch. It was the same one he used when he wanted to feel wronged after doing wrong. "You think I wanted this," he muttered. "Ice," Maybelle said, too softly for most to hear. "I think you wanted the farm money and no sisters to remind you what you spent it on." His cheeks flushed. He lifted his chin toward the crowd, as if her accusation had struck him in public, though he had sold her in public first. "45, called a ranch wife from the back. "For the older one only. I need a house girl." The auctioneer shook his head. "Contract lists all 3 together. All 3 are a burden. the woman said, and folded her arms. Brackett smiled wider. 50. A few murmurs rose. $50 for 3 lives. Mybelle kept her back straight. Her mother had once told her that dignity was not the same as pride. Pride demanded applause. Dignity could stand alone in a storm with nobody clapping. So Mybelle stood. She had patched the dress she wore with thread pulled from the hem. She had washed Ruth's face twice in cold water before dawn, though the girl kept rubbing her eyes. She had tied Elsie's ribbon with hands that wanted to shake. She had promised them, whatever happens, you are not merchandise. Yet the town saw them on a crate, and a crate told its own lie. 55, said a voice from the rear. All heads turned. A man stood beyond the last wagon, one hand on the neck of a tall bay horse. He was broad-shouldered, sun-browned, and dusty from work rather than neglect. His shirt was plain, his boots worn, his jaw shadowed. Mybelle knew him by sight, but not by acquaintance. Everyone in Clearwater knew Cole Holbrook, though he gave them little chance to know him well. He owned the Broken H Ranch west of town. Folks called him Gentle, because he had once sat all night in sleet beside a trapped mare until she let him cut her free. They called him Angry, because he had broken a man's nose for whipping a mule blind in one eye. Both names fit him poorly and perfectly. Brackett looked annoyed. This is not horseflesh, Holbrook. No, Cole said. That is why I am bidding. A sound went through the yard, part surprise, part hunger for scandal. Mybelle felt it brush her skin like burrs. The auctioneer lifted his hand. 55 from Mr. Holbrook. Brackett's eyes sharpened. 60, 70, Cole said. Tobias stared at him. You taking them for ranch help? Cole did not answer Tobias. He looked at Mybelle, but not in the way other men had looked. Not misery, not pitying, not amused. His gaze stopped at her face, then at her hands holding the girl's, then returned to her eyes, as if asking permission for something the law had not bothered to ask. Brackett snapped. 75, 100, Cole said. The yard fell silent. $100 was more than anyone expected. It was more than Brackett wanted to pay, more than Tobias deserved, more than Mybelle could imagine attached to her name without insult. Brackett's pencil paused. You intend to house 3 females on a ranch with no wife? Mrs. Talbot called, her voice thin with righteousness. Cole's mouth tightened. I intend to keep a storekeeper from buying children. A few men coughed. Someone muttered, Careful, Holbrook. Brackett's smile vanished. You accuse me of something. I accuse you of hearing an 8-year-old called light duties and reaching for your ledger. Mybelle felt Ruth tremble beside her. Something dangerous moved through the crowd. Not danger of guns, not yet, but danger of truth spoken where people preferred paperwork. The auctioneer looked eager to finish. $100. Any advance? Brackett stared at Cole with a hatred too neat to be sudden. Let him have them. Folks will talk by supper. Cole's eyes flicked toward Mybelle again, and a shadow crossed his face. He knew it too. Rescue could become another kind of ruin if a town chose to dirty it. The gavel struck the courthouse rail. Sold to Cole Holbrook. Elsie made a small sound, half sob, half question. Mybelle did not move. Sold was a word that could freeze blood. Tobias came forward with his palm out, before the auctioneer had even folded the paper. Cole counted bills from a leather wallet and handed them to the county clerk, not Tobias. Debt, receipt, first, he said. The clerk blinked. Beg pardon. You are taking my money for their contract. I want written proof every claim against the Kane girls is satisfied, and no man here can come after them for another cent. Brackett gave a dry laugh. Listen to him. Rancher thinks he is a lawyer. Cole turned slowly. No, I think I have been cheated enough times to learn paper matters. The clerk, under the eyes of half the county, dipped his pen and began to write. Mybelle watched Cole without knowing what to feel. Gratitude was too dangerous. Hope was worse. Men who paid money expected something in return. Even kind men. Especially kind men who believed they had been noble. When the paper was signed, Cole stepped to the crate, but did not offer his hand as though she were helpless. He simply stood close enough that the boys on the rail stopped grinning. "Miss Kane," he said quietly, "I have a wagon with a canvas cover. There is water in it. Nobody will touch your sisters." My bell searched his face. "And what will you touch, Mr. Holbrook?" The question struck him. Pain moved behind his eyes. "Not offense. Nothing you do not place in my hands." She believed him for only 1 second, but 1 second was more than anyone else had given her. She helped Elsie down first, then Ruth. When Maybelle stepped off the crate, dust rose around her boots. The crowd parted with the reluctance of people robbed of their ending. Tobias looked at her then, truly looked, perhaps expecting tears. Maybelle gave him none. Cole walked beside the 3 sisters without claiming them, without rushing them, without once putting his hand on Maybelle's back, as men did when they wanted a crowd to know they owned the direction a woman walked. At the wagon, Elsie drank water with both hands wrapped around the tin cup. Ruth sat stiff under the canvas, eyes burning toward town. Maybelle climbed in last. Cole tied his bay to the rear and took the reins. As the wagon rolled away from the courthouse, the town began talking behind them. Maybelle heard only one thing clearly, Brackett's voice. "A man does not spend $100 on charity." The road to the Broken H ran through wheat stubble, creek shadow, and miles of grass that bent under the afternoon wind. Maybelle sat with her sisters beneath the wagon cover, watching Clearwater shrink behind them until the church steeple looked like a splinter stuck in the horizon. Nobody spoke for the first mile. Elsie leaned against Maybelle's side and fell asleep from exhaustion, her mouth opened slightly, her cheeks streaked with dust and old tears. Ruth sat opposite them, knees drawn up, one hand curled around a carpet bag that held everything the 3 of them owned. She looked toward Cole's back as he drove. "He bought us," Ruth whispered. Maybelle looked at the canvas flap where sunlight flashed and disappeared. "He bought the paper. That is not different." "It had better be." Ruth's young face hardened in a way Maybelle hated. 14 should not have to learn suspicion so well. After another mile, Cole drew the wagon beneath a cottonwood near a shallow creek. He set the brake, climbed down and walked to the back, stopping several feet away. "Miss Kane," he said, "the horses need water. There is shade here if you want to step down." Maybelle eased Elsie awake. The child blinked, frightened until she saw her sisters. Ruth jumped down without accepting help. Maybelle followed, carrying the carpet bag. Cole unhitched the team and led them to the creek. He moved quietly for such a large man. No wasted motion, no show. Maybelle watched him over Elsie's head. When he returned, he carried a cloth bundle. He placed it on a flat rock between them and stepped back. "Biscuits," he said, "jerky, apples. It is not fine, but it is clean." Ruth stared. "You carry food in case you buy girls." Cole's eyes lowered, and Maybelle saw the words land hard. He deserved some hardness. Maybe all of Clearwater did. "No," he said. "I carry food because I leave before sunup and forget to come back." Elsie looked at Maybelle for permission. Maybelle nodded. The child took half a biscuit and ate as if afraid someone might change his mind. Cole stood by the creek, hat in hand, letting them eat without the burden of being watched. That, more than the food, unsettled Maybelle. Pity leaned close. Kindness knew when to step away. "You live alone?" Maybelle asked after a while. "With a hired hand named Silas Boone when he feels like being useful. He is 63 and mean to fence posts, but he will mind his manners. There is also Mrs. Alma Pike. She comes 3 mornings a week to wash and scold me for owning 1 plate. You have no wife, no children." Something crossed his face, quick as cloud shadow. "No." Maybelle heard the closed gate in that word. She did not push it. Ruth swallowed. "Then why'd you bid?" Cole looked at the creek. "Because Brackett did. That all. That would have been enough." Maybelle studied him. The anger she had seen in town still lived around his mouth, but here it seemed banked. held with discipline. He looked like a man afraid of what his own temper might do if it ever got loose. "The county will say wicked things," Mybelle said. "You know, about me more than you." His gaze lifted. "I know. You cannot stop that by feeding us biscuits." "No," he said. "I can only start with biscuits." For the first time all day, Mybelle nearly smiled. It hurt too much, so she did not. They reached the Broken A near sundown. The ranch house sat in a shallow valley where grass rolled down toward a creek and rose again to blue hills. It was not grand, but it was sturdy. A 2-story timber house with a stone chimney, a barn weathered silver, corrals, a chicken yard, and a long porch with a broken rocker beside the door. A windmill creaked behind the kitchen garden. Beyond the barn, cattle moved like dark stones in the evening light. Elsie lifted her head. "It has flowers." Mybelle followed her gaze. Along the porch rail, someone had once planted hollyhocks. They had gone wild, leaning every direction, pink and red and white against the rough wood. "My mother planted those," Cole said, as if the words had escaped before he meant them to. Mybelle held them carefully. "They are still trying." He looked at the flowers. "Most things do." Silas Boone came from the barn, carrying a pitchfork and suspicion. He was a narrow old man with a gray beard, sharp eyes, and a limp he seemed to blame on the entire world. Cole met him halfway and spoke low. Silas' eyes moved to the sisters, widened, then narrowed again. Mybelle lifted her chin, ready for insult. Instead, Silas spat into the dust and said, "Brackett." Cole nodded. "Figured." The old man looked at Mybelle. "Mom, you girls hungry?" Ruth blinked. Elsie hid behind Mybelle. Cole unlocked the house and stepped aside. "I have 2 rooms upstairs. You might have both. I will sleep in the bunkhouse until other arrangements are made." "Other arrangements?" Mybelle asked. "Whatever arrangements you choose after you have rested and learned what choices are left." The words sounded impossible. Choices left. Mybelle has spent months watching choices disappear one by one, like lanterns blown out down a street. Inside, the house smelled of dust, coffee, leather, and wood smoke. It was a man's house, neglected but not filthy. A rifle hung above the mantel. A Bible rested on a side table. There were boots by the door, a saddle blanket over a chair, and a stack of unpaid bills beneath a chipped blue cup. The kitchen made Mybelle pause. The stove was good iron. The shelves were bare in places, but there was flour, cornmeal, beans, coffee, molasses, and salt pork. Not abundance, but possibility. Ruth noticed too. Her face changed. Mybelle knew that look. Ruth was already measuring what could be made. Cole saw it, but said nothing. He carried 2 buckets of water inside and set them by the stove. "I will fetch bedding. You need not serve us," Mybelle said. He stopped near the door. "I am not serving. I am repairing what I helped witness. You did not put us on that crate." "No," he said, voice roughening. "But I stood in that crowd long enough to hear your sister, called slight, but able." He left before she could answer. That night, Mybelle washed Elsie's face in a basin and tucked her into a narrow bed beneath a quilt that smelled of cedar. Ruth sat by the window, looking toward the barn lantern. "He is strange," Ruth said. "Most people are once they stop pretending." "Do you trust him?" Mybelle loosened her hair and watched herself in the small mirror. Her face looked older than 20. Not ruined, not yet, but worn at the edges. "I trust that he hates Mr. Brackett," she said. "For tonight, that might be enough." Below, the front door opened and closed. Cole's boots crossed the porch. Then silence settled over the house. Mybelle lay awake long after her sisters slept. The bed was softer than anything she had known since before the fever. That softness made her cry at last, though she did it without sound. She cried for her mother, for her father, for the farm, for Tobias, who had chosen greed over blood. She cried because a stranger had paid $100 and given her a locked door between herself and him. Near dawn, she rose before the others and went downstairs. The kitchen waited in gray light. My Belle built a fire, found a bowl, mixed biscuits, sliced salt pork thin, and set coffee to boil. Work steadied her. Work had always been the place where shame could not reach so easily. When Cole entered at sunrise, he stopped on the threshold. The table was set. Not fancy, not pretty, but set for 5. Silas came in behind him and sniffed like a hound. Well, glory. My Belle stood by the stove, hands folded in her apron. She had found the apron on a peg and washed the dust from it. You said there would be choices, she told Cole. Until we know them, my sisters and I will not be idle. Cole looked at the biscuits, then at Ruth cutting apples, then at Elsie carefully placing spoons. You owe me nothing, he said. My Belle met his eyes. That is why I can offer it. Something softened in his face, so slight she might have missed it if she had not been looking. He removed his hat. Yes, ma'am, he said. Then I thank you. By the end of the first week, the broken H began to change. Not loudly, not all at once. It changed in the way a neglected room changes when a window is opened. Curtains were beaten clean and rehung. The porch was swept, the stove blacked and polished. Beans soaked overnight instead of burning in haste. Coffee tasted less like punishment. Silas discovered that shirts could be mended before they became surrender flags. Elsie fed the chickens and named every one of them after queens he had never met. Ruth took over the kitchen garden with a severity that frightened weeds. My Belle worked hardest of all, but not as a servant. That distinction mattered to her, even when nobody said it aloud. On the third morning, Cole placed the contract paper on the kitchen table. The girls had just finished breakfast. Sunlight lay across the boards. This belongs where you can see it, he said. My Belle wiped her hands. Why? So you know what it says. So nobody can tell you different. She sat and read the document line by line. Her face burned at some phrases, but she forced herself through them. Guardianship, labor, debt satisfaction, term of service, county oversight. It was ugly, but Cole had added something below the clerk's seal. Payment rendered in full by Cole Holbrook under protest. No debt remains against My Belle Kane, Ruth Kane, or Elsie Kane. Further claim by kin or creditor to be challenged. My Belle touched the ink under protest. Cole leaned against the counter. I wanted it known I did not agree with the selling. But you still hold the paper. For now. For now. For now can last a long time when a man benefits from it. He accepted the blow with a nod. Then we will put a shorter time to it. I rode to Judge Emery yesterday. He returns from Abilene in 3 weeks. When he does, I will petition to dissolve the labor portion and settle guardianship properly. Properly how? That depends on what you want. My Belle almost laughed. Want had become a dangerous luxury. I want my sisters safe. I want work that does not come with chains hidden under polite words. I want Tobias unable to sell us twice. Cole's eyes darkened. Then we start there. He said, we, as if it were simple. It was not simple. Town came to the ranch in pieces. First came Mrs. Talbot, with a basket of preserves and eyes sharp enough to cut cloth. She stood on the porch and asked My Belle whether Mr. Holbrook had arranged for a chaperone. Mrs. Pike is here Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, My Belle said. And other days, Mr. Holbrook sleeps in the bunkhouse and knocks before entering his own kitchen. Mrs. Talbot flushed. I only worry for appearances. My Belle looked past her to the open land. Appearances watched my sisters on a crate and did not bid. The preserves left with Mrs. Talbot. Then came Franklin Brackett, driving his store wagon with a smile nailed to his face. Cole was in the south pasture. My Belle met Brackett at the porch steps with Ruth behind her and Silas watching from the barn. Miss Kane, Brackett said, I brought yard goods. Thought you might need proper dresses now that you are installed. Installed. We need nothing on credit, My Belle said. His eyes flicked over the house. Credit is a useful thing. Your brother understood that. My brother understood very little. Brackett's smile thinned. You speak boldly for a woman in your position. My position is on this porch for now. He leaned closer. Holbrook is respectable only because people have forgotten certain things. They can remember if encouraged. My Belle's stomach tightened. What things? Brackett glanced toward the barn. Ask him about the fire at Red Willow. Ask him why a gentleman keeps no wife, no child, and no company after dark. Ruth stepped forward. Leave? Brackett looked at the girl, amused. The little one has teeth. My Belle moved Ruth behind her. Mr. Brackett, you are standing on land where you are not welcome. He laughed under his breath. But Silas had already started across the yard with a pitchfork held too casually. Brackett climbed into his wagon. County Court will not leave 3 orphan girls in a bachelor's keeping forever. Remember that. When Cole returned and heard, his face went quiet, in a way my Belle disliked more than anger. What happened at Red Willow? She asked. He stood near the corral, one hand on the rail. A yearling nosed his sleeve. My brother's ranch burned 7 years ago, he said. His wife and boy died in it. Brackett's cousin owned the note and took the land after. Folks said I should have saved them. Could you have? Cole's jaw worked. I was 10 miles away, buying medicine for the boy's fever. My Belle felt the shape of the wound then, not guilt alone. Something older and heavier. A man could be innocent and still punish himself for surviving. Why would Brackett use that against you? Because I accused his cousin of setting the fire for insurance and land. Could not prove it. Lost my temper in court. Broke a chair. Nearly struck the sheriff. Since then, Brackett likes reminding folks I am dangerous. My Belle thought of the courthouse yard. His voice hard as iron when Elsie had been called able enough. Are you? She asked. Cole looked at her directly. To some men, the answer should have frightened her. It did not. Perhaps because he did not pretend otherwise. Days lengthened. Work found rhythm. My Belle learned the ranch accounts after discovering Cole kept receipts in a flour tin, bank notices behind the clock, and cattle tallies written on fence boards. She spent evenings at the kitchen table sorting numbers, while Cole sat across from her carving replacement pegs or mending harness. They spoke little at first. The silence between them changed slowly from guarded to companionable. Ruth had a gift for butter. Mrs. Pike taught her to skim cream, and Ruth improved on the method within a week, setting crocks in the spring house at just the right depth. Elsie gathered eggs and made labels with crooked letters. My Belle baked bread in quantities the ranch had never seen, then traded 2 loaves to a neighbor for rhubarb. The next week she traded butter for seed potatoes. Cole noticed everything. You bargain better than most cattlemen, he told her one evening. My mother said hunger teaches arithmetic. He looked at the ledger beneath her hand. What else did she teach? My Belle's pen paused. That a home is not walls. It is what people can count on when the walls fail. Cole said nothing, but his gaze moved around the kitchen. The clean lamp, the sleeping cat Elsie had coaxed from the barn, Ruth's drying herbs, My Belle's mended curtain moving in night air. This place failed that test before you came, he said. Places can learn, and so can men. She looked at him then. The lamplight carved deep lines beside his mouth. He seemed older in the evenings, when weariness found him. If they are brave enough to be corrected, she said. One corner of his mouth lifted. That sounds costly. It is. Their eyes held too long. My Belle lowered hers first, not because she was ashamed, but because something tender had risen in her so unexpectedly that she did not trust herself with it. 2 weeks after the auction, a storm rolled over the hills with a green-black sky and wind that flattened grass. Cole and Silas were bringing cattle down from the north rise when lightning cracked near the barn. Elsie screamed from the porch. Ruth pulled her inside. My Belle saw one of the younger horses break through a weak rail and bolt toward the ravine. Cole rode after it. The rain came hard, turning dust to running mud. My Belle stood at the kitchen window, heart pounding, until she saw horse and rider near the wash. Cole had roped the yearling, but his bay slipped. For one terrible moment, Both animals struggled near the edge. Mabel ran. She did not stop for shawl or hat. Mud sucked at her boots. Rain blinded her. She reached the ravine as Cole pulled the yearling away and swung down, limping. His bay trembled but stood. "You should not be out here," he shouted. "Neither should you," she shouted back. The yearling reared, rope tangled around a mesquite root. Mabel moved without thinking, speaking low as she had to frighten milk cows on the farm. "Easy now. Easy, foolish prince. Nobody is eating you today." Cole stared at her through rain. "Keep talking," he said. She did. She moved closer inch by inch, palm out, voice steady. The horse shuddered, rolled its eyes, then lowered enough for Cole to free the rope. Together, they led it back to the barn, drenched and shaking. Inside, while rain hammered the roof, Cole stripped off his gloves. Blood ran from a cut across his knuckles. Mabel took his hand before remembering. She had no right. He went still. The barn smelled of wet hay, leather, and storm. Ruth and Elsie stood in the doorway, wide-eyed. Silas pretended to inspect a bridle. Mabel racked Cole's knuckles, with a clean strip torn from her petticoat hem. "You saved that horse," he said. "You had already saved him." "No, I was pulling. You were calming." Her fingers slowed. "There is use for both." His voice dropped. "Yes, ma'am, there is." The words were plain, but Mabel felt them long after the storm passed. That night, Elsie fell asleep at the table before supper. Ruth carried her upstairs. Silas retired early, muttering about old bones. Mabel and Cole remained in the kitchen, with rain dripping from the eaves. "I have been thinking," Cole said. "Dangerous." He almost smiled. "You and Ruth make more butter than we can eat. Your bread trades well. Mrs. Pike says the station would pay for decent meals if someone reliable supplied them." Mabel folded a towel. "The station pays bracket for hard biscuits and sour coffee. Only because nobody offers better." She looked at him carefully. "Are you suggesting I sell food under your name?" "I am suggesting you sell under yours. My name was on a crate 2 weeks ago. Then put it somewhere else." The towel stilled in her hands. Cole reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper. On it, in careful block letters, he had written, "Kane's Sisters, Kitchen and Dairy." Mabel read it twice. Her throat tightened. "It is only an idea," he said quickly, "not a demand." She touched the paper as she had touched the contract. One paper had called her labor. This one called her by her name. Ruth came down the stairs and read over her shoulder. "Dairy, if you want," Cole said. Ruth's eyes lit for the first time since the auction. "We would need more crocks and a proper churn," Mabel said before she could stop herself. "And labels," Elsie mumbled from the stairs. Not asleep after all. Cole looked from one sister to the next. Something in him eased, as if he had been holding his breath since the courthouse. Mabel held the paper against her apron. For the first time since her parents died, the future did not look like a door closing. It looked like a table being built. Kane's Sisters' Kitchen and Dairy began with 12 butter rolls, 6 loaves of bread, 2 jars of plum preserves from Mrs. Pike's cousin, and Elsie's crooked labels tied with string. By harvest season, stage drivers were stopping at the broken hour instead of brackets freight shed. Cowboys bought biscuits wrapped in cloth for the trail. Ranch wives came for butter and left asking about how she kept it so sweet. Ruth grew solemn with importance, guarding the spring house as if it were a bank vault. Elsie learned to count change, though she still gave away ginger cookies to anyone who looked sad. Cole added a long table under the porch shade. Silas built shelves. Mrs. Pike came more often and complained less. Mabel kept accounts in a new ledger Cole bought, but did not write his name in. "You bought it," she told him. "You will fill it. I will pay you back. You can pay the store in town for more jars." She looked up. "Brackett's store? For now," Cole said. "Until we find another supplier." Mabel heard the caution. Brackett had already begun lowering prices on flour for anyone who refused to buy from the Kane sisters. He told stage drivers the ranch water was unclean. He told church ladies Maybelle was living beyond the protection of law. He told men at the saloon that Cole had paid dear for what Tobias Kane should have given away. The rumors reached the ranch like smoke under a door. One Sunday, Maybelle took Ruth and Elsie to church in the wagon, while Cole rode beside them. The town watched their arrival with open appetite. Maybelle wore a blue dress she had remade from old fabric found in a trunk. Ruth's hair was neatly braided. Elsie carried a small Bible with both hands. At the church steps, Mrs. Talbot blocked their path. "The Ladies' Aid has discussed your situation," she said. "How generous of them," Maybelle replied. Mrs. Talbot's mouth pinched. "We believe Ruth and Elsie should board with proper families until Judge Emery rules. Appearances matter. Their souls matter." Maybelle felt Ruth stiffen. Cole dismounted, but he did not come between them. Maybelle was grateful. This insult belonged first to her, and she would answer it. "My sister's souls were present at the auction," she said. "I did not notice the Ladies' Aid bidding for them." A gasp moved through the churchyard. Mrs. Talbot colored. "You ungrateful girl." Maybelle's hands trembled, but her voice held. "I am grateful for kindness. I am finished mistaking judgment for it." Cole stepped beside her then, not in front. "Morning, Mrs. Talbot." His tone was mild. His eyes were not. Inside the church, they sat in the rear pew. Halfway through the first hymn, Elsie slipped her hand into Maybelle's. Cole stood on Maybelle's other side, singing low and rough, barely carrying the tune. She had not expected him to sing. The sound moved through her strangely, like a door opening in a house she thought empty. After service, Judge Emery returned to town. He was a stooped man with tired eyes, a white beard, and a habit of listening so long people confessed extra things just to fill the silence. He asked to see Cole, Maybelle, and the girls at the courthouse the following morning. Brackett was already there when they arrived. So was Tobias. Maybelle stopped in the doorway. Her brother looked better fed than when he sold them. He wore a new vest. He smiled, as if they were all meeting after a pleasant separation. "Belle," he said. "Do not call me that." His smile faltered. Cole's hand closed once at his side, then opened. Maybelle saw the restraint and understood what it cost. Judge Emery reviewed the papers. Brackett stood as interested creditor, though his debt had been paid. Tobias claimed family concern. Mrs. Talbot sat behind him with two ladies from church. "Mr. Holbrook," the judge said, "you understand the difficulty. You are unmarried. The elder sister is of age, but the younger two require guardianship. Your ranch is respectable in property, but unusual in household arrangement." "Unusual is not unlawful," Cole said. "No, but neither is concern unlawful." Brackett rose. "Your Honor, nobody questions Mr. Holbrook's dramatic generosity, but a bachelor ranch is no place for orphan girls. I am prepared to arrange employment and lodging at my store, under supervision, or divide them among suitable families." "Divide," Ruth cried. Ruth cried. Maybelle put an arm around her. Tobias stood. "As their brother, I regret acting hastily before. I was overcome by debt. I want my family restored." Maybelle stared at him. "You want what money is left." Tobias's face hardened. "You always did think yourself better. You sold Elsie. I saved her from starving." Cole's voice cut through the room. "You spent the mule money on cards." Tobias turned red. "You calling me a liar?" "Yes." The word cracked like a whip. Judge Emery struck his desk. "Mr. Holbrook." Cole stepped back, breathing hard. Maybelle looked at him, willing him to see the trap. Brackett wanted anger. Tobias wanted anger. They wanted the county to remember Red Willow and call Cole dangerous. Cole looked at Maybelle, and the fury in him changed shape. It did not vanish. It became discipline. He removed a folded paper from his coat. Your Honor, I have no wish to own any claim over the Kane sisters. I paid the debt to stop a wrong. The business they have begun on my ranch belongs to them. Miss Kane keeps the accounts. Ruth Kane manages dairy work. Even Elsie earns with labels and egg money. A few people snickered at Elsie's name. Cole turned just enough for the sound to die. He continued, I ask the court to release Mabel Kane from any labor obligation at once. As for Ruth and Elsie, I ask that Mabel be named guardian, with Mrs. Alma Pike serving as witness to household propriety, until a better legal arrangement is made. Brackett laughed. A penniless young woman as guardian. Mabel stood. I am not penniless. Every eye shifted to her. Her hands were cold, but she lifted her ledger. Kane Sisters Kitchen and Dairy has earned $31.60 in 6 weeks after costs. We have standing orders from the stage station and 3 ranches. We own 2 churns, 24 jars, 6 hens purchased with our own profit, and 1 milk cow half paid for. Judge Emery's brows rose. You keep detailed accounts? Yes, sir. Brackett scoffed. A little butter money does not make a household. No, Mabel said. But it makes a beginning. My brother did not sell. Tobias lunged a step. You ungrateful. Cole moved faster, placing himself between Tobias and Mabel. He did not touch Tobias. He did not raise a fist. He only stood there, big and still. The room froze. Tobias stepped back first. Judge Emery leaned in his chair. I will consider the petition. Until then, the girls remain at the Broken H, provided Mrs. Pike confirms conditions. But let me be plain. If scandal arises, if impropriety is proven or reasonably suspected, the younger girls will be removed. Reasonably suspected. Brackett smiled. The warning followed them home like a storm cloud. For 3 days, nothing happened. Then everything did. A stage driver found a bottle of laudanum tucked into a crate of Kane Sisters biscuits. He brought it to town roaring that Holbrook's women were drugging customers. Brackett produced witnesses who claimed they had seen Ruth near the freight shed. Tobias swore Mabel had always been cunning with medicines during their mother's fever. Mrs. Talbot declared that disorder bred sin. By sundown, Judge Emery ordered a temporary halt to the business pending inquiry. Mabel stood in the kitchen after the deputy left, the order paper shaking in her hand. Ruth cried with rage. I never touched that crate after Cole loaded it. I know, Mabel said. Elsie whispered, will they take us? Nobody answered. Cole took the order and read it once. His face went pale beneath the tan. This is Brackett, he said. Can you prove it? Mabel asked. Not yet. Then kindness is not enough anymore. He looked at her. She had never sounded so tired. No, he said. It is not. That night, Mabel found him in the barn saddling his bay. Where are you going? To find the man who hauled that crate. In the dark. Yes, with anger. Cole tightened the cinch. With purpose. She stepped closer. There is a difference. He looked down at his hands. I am trying to make one. Mabel thought of Red Willow, of a chair broken in court, of a man who had lived 7 years under the name Dangerous because grief had made him loud once. If you strike the wrong man tonight, they win, she said. Cole's jaw flexed. She placed a hand on the saddle between them. If you want to defend us, come back with truth, not bruises. He closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, the anger was still there, but beneath it was something that looked like surrender to her judgment. Yes, ma'am, he said. He rode out under a moonless sky. Mabel stood in the barn doorway, long after hoofbeats faded. She knew then that fear had changed. She was still afraid of Brackett, of Tobias, of courts and whispers and papers. But she was no longer afraid of Cole Holbrook's strength. She was afraid of losing it. Cole returned at dawn with mud on his boots, blood on his sleeve, and a flour sack tied behind his saddle. Mabel ran from the porch before pride could stop her. "You are hurt, not mine," he said, then saw her face and added quickly, "Mostly not mine." Silas came from the barn swearing. Ruth and Elsie appeared in the doorway. Cole untied the sack and carried it into the kitchen. Inside were three things: a torn Kane Sisters label, a receipt from Brackett's store for laudanum, and a small wooden crate marked with the freight shed brand. "The stage driver drank all night at Lacey's," Cole said. He did not know much, but he remembered Tobias Kane helping load crates after Brackett claimed he was short-handed. "I found this in the shed refuse." Mabel picked up the receipt. "This proves Brackett bought laudanum." "Nah, that he placed it. Tobias did." Her stomach tightened. "You saw him." "I found him at the old mill with two of Brackett's men." He admitted enough while trying to run. Ruth's face went white. "Our brother did this." Mabel closed her eyes. Some griefs returned like wolves. "Where is Tobias now?" she asked. Cole hesitated. Mabel looked at the blood again. "Cole!" He pulled a knife. "Silas, get Sheriff Dane." Silas left at once. Cole sat heavily at the table. The sleeve of his shirt was cut near the forearm, blood seeping through. Mabel fetched water and bandages. Her hands were steady until she saw the depth of the wound. "You said mostly not yours." "I have had worse from barbed wire." "Barbed wire does not lie to soothe women." "I was not soothing women. I was soothing you." Her eyes lifted to his. The kitchen was still around them. Ruth took Elsie upstairs without being told. Mabel cleaned the cut. Cole did not flinch. That annoyed her, so she pressed harder. He flinched. "Good," she said. A tired smile touched his mouth. Then he reached into his coat with his uninjured hand and pulled out another folded paper. "There is more." Mabel dried her hands. "I rode to the bank before coming home. Put the West pasture up as bond." "For what?" "For your guardianship petition. Judge Emery wanted proof you could provide independent housing if questioned. The West pasture has the old line cabin, a spring, and 10 acres good for a garden. I deeded it to you." Mabel stared at him. He continued because silence frightened him more than gunfire. "It is not charity. It is repayment. For what debt? For being too late at Red Willow. For being almost too late at the auction. For every time I thought hating men like Brackett was the same as helping the people they hurt. That land is yours. It was lying empty. It is your winter grazing. Eddie can manage. You could lose cattle." Yes." He finally met her eyes. Mabel felt anger rise in her, unexpected and hot. "Do not make me another grave for your guilt." The words struck deep. She saw it. The color left his face. "I did not mean," he began. "Yes, you did. You meant to bleed quietly and give away land and call it justice. You meant to save us so terribly that none of us could stop you." He stood, then swayed a little from blood loss. Mabel pointed at the chair. "Sit down." He sat. She paced once, gripping the deed. "Do you think I want honor built from your ruin?" "No." "Then why?" "Because Brackett will not stop." His voice broke rough. "Because the court can take Ruth and Elsie if you have no roof in your own name. Because I know what it is to have a family removed from this earth and be left with nothing but reasons it should have been you instead." The anger drained out of her as quickly as it came. Cole looked down. "I am not trying to own your gratitude. I swear that." Mabel stood before him. "Then let me choose how to receive help." He nodded once. "All right. I will not take the West pasture as a gift." His mouth opened. "I will buy it." He looked at the small kitchen, the suspended business, the sisters upstairs. "Mabel, $1 now," she said. "Fair payments from the dairy profits for the rest, written proper. You will not refuse me dignity while claiming to defend it." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he reached into his pocket, found a pencil, and pushed the D toward her. "Write the terms." Her throat tightened. She sat beside him and wrote while his blood spotted the bandage beneath her hand. By afternoon, Sheriff Dane brought Tobias to the courthouse with a bruised cheek, a bound wrist, and enough fear in him to tell the truth. Brackett had promised him money to plant the laudanum and stir talk. The plan was simple: ruin the Kane business, prove scandal around the Broken H, remove the girls, and place them where Brackett could profit from their labor without Cole's interference. But Brackett was not a man easily cornered. At the hearing, he denied everything. He called Tobias a liar, Cole violent, Maybelle ambitious, Ruth unstable, and Elsie unfortunate. He had lawyers from Abilene. He had receipts explained away. He had witnesses who changed their stories once his eyes found them. Then Maybelle stood. She did not look at Brackett. She looked at Judge Emery. "Your Honor, men have argued all morning about who has claim to us. Brother, creditor, county, guardian, rancher, storekeeper. I am asking when my sisters and I became land to be fenced." The room went quiet. I was on that crate. I heard what people called us: able, burden, lot, contract. I heard Mr. Holbrook bid, and I thought I had only been sold to a kinder man. But kindness alone would still have left me standing beneath someone else's name. Cole's eyes lowered. Maybelle unfolded the contract she and Cole had written. "So, I am placing my name here. I have purchased the West Pasture cabin from Mr. Holbrook under fair terms. I have income records. I have Mrs. Pike's willingness to stand as household witness until Ruth comes of age. I have orders for work once our name is cleared. And I have 2 sisters who are not goods." Ruth sat straighter. Elsie clutched Mrs. Pike's hand. Maybelle turned then, facing the room that had watched her shame weeks earlier. "If you are afraid to leave children with a woman who was poor yesterday, say that. If you are afraid to offend Mr. Brackett, because half of you owe him money, say that. But do not dress cowardice as concern for our souls." Mrs. Talbot looked down. Brackett rose, furious. "This is impertinence." Cole stood too. But Maybelle lifted one hand. He stopped. That mattered. The whole room saw it. Cole Holbrook, known for anger, stopped because Maybelle Kane asked him to. Judge Emery leaned back. For a long while, he only looked at the papers. Then, a small voice spoke. Elsie had stepped forward, trembling but determined. "Mr. Brackett said I was light duties." Maybelle turned. Elsie swallowed. "At the auction, he said I could run parcels. Mr. Cole bought the paper, but he never made me carry anything heavier than eggs. Maybelle says I am a child first." Judge Emery's tired face changed. Brackett muttered, "Sentiment." The judge struck his desk so sharply, the room jumped. "Enough," he ordered. Brackett's freight shed searched. By nightfall, Sheriff Dane found 2 more bottles of laudanum hidden among goods marked for the stage, along with labels stolen from the Kane sisters' supply box. Brackett was not jailed that day. Men like him had roots deep in money and law, but he was charged, and the county saw him led from court without his hat. Tobias was held for fraud and assault. Maybelle did not look at him as he passed. Then he said, "Belle, please." She turned at the name she had forbidden. For one heartbeat, she saw the boy who had once carried Ruth on his shoulders, the brother who had known how to whistle through his teeth, the son their mother had prayed over. Then she saw the man who had stood beside an auctioneer. "No," she said. It was not loud. It did not need to be. The judge dissolved the labor contract. Maybelle was named legal guardian of Ruth and Elsie under court review. Kane's sisters' kitchen and dairy was cleared to operate. The West Pasture sale was recognized as valid. Mrs. Pike cried into her handkerchief and denied it. Outside the courthouse, the same yard waited. The crate was gone. Cole stood beside Maybelle at the bottom step, pale from his wound but upright. The town watched them again. This time, Maybelle did not feel herself shrinking. "Miss Kane," Cole said quietly, "you did what I could not." "What is that?" "You stood angry without letting anger lead." She looked at him. "I learned from watching you fight not to." A sad smile moved across his face. That does not sound flattering. It is the truest compliment I have. They walked to the wagon together. He did not touch her, not yet. But when he helped Elsie climb up, the little girl kissed his cheek. Cole froze as if struck. Elsie whispered, "Thank you for not buying us wrong." Maybelle saw his eyes shine before he turned away. The West Pasture cabin had a roof that leaked, a door that dragged, one cracked window, and a view of grassland so wide that Ruth declared it looked like God had forgotten where to put the fence. Maybelle loved it immediately. Not because it was fine. It was not because it was easy. It would be months of work. She loved it because the key lay in her palm and the deed bore her name in ink no brother could erase. Cole repaired the roof with Silas, while Maybelle and Mrs. Pike scrubbed the floors. Ruth planned a larger spring house before the first bedstead was moved in. Elsie planted hollyhock seeds along the cabin wall, stolen with permission from Cole's porch flowers. Flowers do not count as stealing if they want to travel, Elsie explained. Cole nodded solemnly. I have heard that. The business grew faster than the cabin improved. Once Brackett's schemes became public, guilt purchased nearly as much butter as appetite did. Maybelle accepted the money, but not the false sweetness. Mrs. Talbot came to the ranch one morning, with 3 clean aprons and an apology folded so tightly it nearly vanished. I should have helped sooner, she said. Yes, Maybelle answered. Mrs. Talbot flinched. Maybelle took the aprons. And these will help now. It was not forgiveness entire, but it was a door left unlatched. Cole watched from the barn as women who had once whispered began arriving to buy bread, cream, eggs, and canned peaches. Stage drivers praised the meals. Cowboys lingered at the porch table. Neighboring ranches placed standing orders. Silas painted a proper sign in black letters on whiteboard. Kane Sisters, Kitchen, and Dairy. Elsie insisted on adding a small painted chicken in the corner. It looked more like a lopsided angel, but nobody dared say so. By winter, the Kane sisters had built more than a business. They had built a place where hungry people came without shame. A widow traded sewing for milk. A boy whose father drank too much ate stew on the porch and carried firewood in payment. 2 Swedish sisters from a failing homestead learned butterwork from Ruth. Maybelle hired them part-time when orders grew too large. What exactly are you building? Cole asked one evening as he stood in the doorway of the new spring house. Maybelle looked at Ruth teaching the Swedish girls how to pack butter molds. Elsie sat on an overturned crate, writing labels with fierce concentration. I thought it was a dairy, Maybelle said. Cole leaned against the doorframe. It started as a dairy. She smiled faintly. Then, perhaps I am building what we needed and did not find. His gaze stayed on her. For more than us, the words traveled. By spring, Clearwater County had never seen anything like it. The Kane sisters' place at the West Pasture became a stop between town and the Broken H. Part kitchen, part dairy, part refuge, part proof. Maybelle sold shares in a cooperative creamery to small farms that Brackett had once squeezed with unfair prices. Ruth kept quality so high that buyers from 2 counties over began asking for Kane butter. Elsie, now rounder-cheeked and less watchful, became famous for labels decorated with flowers, chickens, and once, by request, Sheriff Dane's mustache. Then came the county fair. Maybelle did not want to enter. Ruth did. They need to see, Ruth said, standing in the cabin kitchen with flour on her nose. Not just buy. See. See what? That we are not what they thought. Maybelle looked at her sister. Ruth had grown taller in 6 months. Or perhaps she only stood differently now. There was pride in her, but not the brittle kind that broke into anger. This pride had roots. All right, Maybelle said. We will enter. For 3 days, they prepared. Ruth churned butter until her arms ached. Maybelle baked bread and pies. Elsie polished jars and tied labels. Mrs. Pike supervised with the authority of a general. Silas loaded the wagon and warned every jar not to break. Cole said little, but he hitched the best team and wore his clean black coat. At the fairgrounds, Maybelle saw the old auction crate behind the livestock pen. Her steps slowed. It was only a crate. Weathered wood, rusted nails, no power except what memory gave it. Yet, the sight stole the breath from her lungs. Cole saw. Maybelle, he said softly. I am all right. No, he said, but you are standing. She looked at him then. Since autumn, something between them had grown steady and unspoken. He came to the cabin most evenings under some practical excuse. A hinge, a delivery, an account question, a calf needing Ruth's opinion, a sack of flour too heavy for Mrs. Pike. Sometimes he stayed for supper. Sometimes he and Maybelle walked the fence line while dusk gathered, speaking of weather, cattle, court dates, books, grief, and once, briefly, the family he had lost at Red Willow. He had not courted her in the manner of young men, with poems and ribbons. He had courted her by asking what she wanted before offering what he had. He had courted her by listening to Ruth's plans and Elsie's stories. He had courted her by never once stepping across the line her fear had drawn until she moved it herself. And Maybelle had moved it, inch by inch. She knew the shape of his hand now from passing ledgers across a table. She knew the sound of his laugh, rare and rusty. When Elsie told him his horse looked judgmental, she knew that when anger took him, he went quiet first and spoke later if he could. She knew he still visited his brother's family grave every month. She knew he had begun bringing flowers back from those visits, instead of only guilt. But in public, they remained careful. Clearwater still watched. At the fair, Kane's sister's kitchen and dairy drew a crowd. Their butter won first premium before noon. Ruth pretended not to care, and then cried behind the tent. Elsie won a blue ribbon for decorated preserves. The one judge said the chicken looked like a ghost. Maybelle's bread sold out so fast, Mrs. Pike had to guard the last loaf for display with a wooden spoon. Then Franklin Brackett appeared. He was thinner after months of legal trouble, but not broken. Men with money seldom shattered where anyone could see. His store had lost customers. His freight contracts were under review. Tobias had been sentenced to labor on a road crew west of Abilene after confessing. Brackett, with lawyers, had delayed worse punishment. But his name no longer opened every door. He stopped before the Kane table. The crowd quieted. Miss Kane, he said, voice smooth. Quiet in enterprise. Maybelle folded her hands. Mr. Brackett, I hear you are taking suppliers from my accounts. I hear they are choosing better terms. His eyes hardened. Ambition changes a woman. No, Maybelle said. Safety reveals her. A murmur moved through the tent. Brackett leaned closer. You think this county honors you? They enjoy a spectacle. First your shame, now your little triumph. They will tire of both. Cole stepped from behind the table, but Maybelle touched his sleeve. It was the first time she had done so in public. The small contact moved through the crowd like a match flame. Cole looked down at her hand on his arm. So did Brackett. So did half the county. Maybelle did not remove it. You are wrong, she told Brackett. This county might not know how to honor women quickly, but it can learn. So can I. I once thought being seen was the same as being shamed. Now I understand shame belonged to those who watched children sold and called it order. Brackett's face darkened. Careful, Cole's voice came low. No, you be careful, this time. Nobody scolded him for anger. Sheriff Dane walked over, Tums tucked in his belt. Move along, Brackett. Psst, Brackett looked around and found no easy ally. Mrs. Talbot stared at him coldly. The blacksmith's wife turned her shoulder. The stage driver spat in the dirt. Even men who owed him money pretended interest in prize squash. Brackett left. Only then did Maybelle realize she was still holding Cole's sleeve. She released it, embarrassed. Cole bent his head slightly. Lie did not mind. Her cheeks warmed. I noticed. The award ceremony took place near sundown. The judge called Ruth's name for dairy excellence and Maybelle's for bread and preserves. Then Unexpectedly, Judge Emery stepped forward with another paper. The county board recognizes Kane's Sisters Kitchen and Dairy as the first cooperative creamery in Clearwater County, providing fair purchase to small farms and meals to travelers, widows, workers, and children in need. Mabel stood very still. Ruth began crying openly this time. Elsie bounced on her toes. Mrs. Pike sobbed without denial. Silas wiped his eyes and blamed dust, though there was none. Judge Emery looked over his spectacles. "Miss Kane, would you care to say a word?" Mabel wanted to refuse. Her old self would have. The self on the crate had survived by staying rigid, by offering the crowd no more than they had already taken. But she was not on the crate now. She stepped forward. 6 months earlier, the county had watched her sold. Now the county waited for her voice. "My sisters and I thank you," she said, "not only for this honor, but for every honest order, every fair price, every hand that helped mend what fear and greed tried to break. We did not build this alone." Her eyes found Cole. He stood at the edge of the crowd, hat in hand, trying not to be seen and failing. Mabel continued, "But we did learn something. A home can begin with rescue, but it cannot live on rescue alone. It needs work, trust, apology, courage. It needs people willing to see worth before proof is easy." Cole's face changed. Mabel stepped down from the platform. For a moment, no one moved. Then Ruth clapped. Elsie joined. Mrs. Pike, Silas, Sheriff Dane. The sound spread until the fairground filled with applause that felt nothing like the cruel hunger of the auction yard. Mabel walked straight to Cole. He looked almost frightened. "Miss Kane," he said. She held out her hand, not because she needed help down from a crate, not because the law required it, not because hunger forced her or shame cornered her. She held it out because choice, after all that had happened, was the holiest thing she owned. Cole looked at her hand, then at her face. "Mabel," he said, voice rough. "Yes." It was answer enough for a question he had not yet dared ask. He took her hand. His palm was warm, calloused, and careful. The county saw. "Let them." Ruth smiled through tears. Elsie whispered something to Mrs. Pike that made the older woman laugh and cry harder. Cole did not pull Mabel close. He simply stood with her hand in his, as if holding something entrusted, not taken. Later, when the fair lamps were lit and wagons rolled home under a violet sky, Cole walked beside Mabel to the old auction crate. Together, without ceremony, they lifted it and carried it behind the Kane sisters' tent. "What are you doing with that?" Silas called. Mabel looked at Cole. Cole looked at Elsie. Elsie considered with grave importance. "Flower box." So it became one. The next week, the crate that had once held shame sat beneath the front window of the West Pasture cabin, filled with soil and hollyhock seedlings. By summer, flowers climbed from it in pink, red, and white, bright enough to be seen from the road. Travelers who stopped at Kane's Sisters Kitchen and Dairy saw the sign, the spring house, the porch table, the wagons lined up for butter, the orphan girls no longer spoken of as burdens. They saw Ruth directing suppliers twice her age. They saw Elsie running with ribbons in her hair and egg money in her pocket. They saw Mabel Kane standing in her own doorway, ledger in hand, sunlight on her face. And more often than not, they saw Cole Holbrook nearby, repairing a hinge that did not need repairing, bringing in flour, or leaning against the fence with the quiet patience of a man who had learned love was not the same as rescue. One evening at the end of summer, after the last customer left and Ruth took Elsie inside, Mabel found Cole by the hollyhock crate. He touched one red bloom gently. "Your sister was right. It made a good flower box. Elsie is often right." Loudly, he smiled. The sky burned gold over the hills. Cattle lowed in the distance. From inside the cabin came Ruth's voice telling Elsie to wash before supper. The world felt ordinary, and that was the miracle. Cole turned his hat in his hands. "Mabel, I have been trying to ask you something for a month. I know. His eyebrows lifted. You know, you repair very many unbroken hinges. A laugh escaped him, soft and surprised. Then his face grew serious. I do not want to be another man who decides your future at a courthouse table, he said. I do not want to offer marriage like shelter from weather. You have shelter. You built it. I do not want to offer my name as if yours is not already honor. My Belle's throat tightened. Cole stepped closer, leaving enough space for her answer to live. But if you ever want a life joined with mine, not owned, not owed, I would spend the rest of my days trying to be worthy of that choosing. My Belle looked at the cabin, the sign, the flowers, the road that led both to town and away from it. She thought of the crate, the gavel, the first biscuit on a rock, the storm, the court, the deed written in her own terms, the first time she had touched his sleeve before everyone. Then she placed her hand in his. You may ask again, she said. Cole's eyes shone. My Belle Kane, will you marry me when you are ready, in whatever season you choose, with your sisters, standing where they can see you are not being given away? Tears rose, but they were not the old kind. Yes, she said, at harvest. Here, by the hollyhocks. He bowed his head over her hand, not kissing it until she nodded. His lips brushed her knuckles, with a reverence that made her heart ache open. From the cabin window, Elsie shouted, "Eddie!" Finally asking, Ruth yelled, "Elsie!" Cole laughed, then truly laughed, and my Belle laughed with him until the sound carried across the west pasture. At harvest, they married beneath the hollyhocks grown from the auction crate. Judge Emery spoke the vows. Mrs. Pike wept into 2 handkerchiefs. Silas gave Ruth permission to cry, and then cried first. Sheriff Dane stood watch, as if love itself required guarding. Half the county came, some out of affection, some out of curiosity, all of them witnessing what they had once misunderstood. No one gave my Belle away. Ruth and Elsie walked beside her, one on each side, not as burdens, not as goods, but as sisters. When my Belle reached Cole, he did not take her hand until she offered it. The county saw that too. After the vows, Kane's sister's kitchen and dairy served the wedding supper: bread, butter, stew, preserves, pies, and coffee strong enough for Silas to approve. The porch glowed with lanterns. Children chased fireflies. Cowboys ate quietly, softened by food and music. Women who had once turned away helped wash plates. Men who had once laughed at the auction crate stood in line to shake Cole's hand and then my Belle's. As evening settled, Cole and my Belle stood near the flower box, their fingers intertwined openly. "You shocked the county, Mrs. Holbrook," he said. She looked at the sign, still bearing Kane's sisters, at Ruth arguing prices with a rancher, at Elsie asleep in Mrs. Pike's lap, with frosting on her chin. "No," my Belle said. "We built something." The shock was that they finally saw it. Cole squeezed her hand. The wind moved through the hollyhocks, and the old crate held flowers as if it had never held shame. Warm light spilled from the cabin. Supper waited on the table. Ruth called for them to come inside before the biscuits cool. Elsie woke just enough to ask whether home could have 2 names now. My Belle looked at Cole, and together they answered, "Yes." Then, before the whole county and beneath a sky wide enough for every sorrow to loosen, my Belle Kane Holbrook walked into the warm house hand in hand with the angry, gentle cowboy, who had not bought her life, but helped her claim it.